Hello, and welcome back to US History and Elections. It is Sunday, the 10th of November 2024, and 5 days after the presidential election and Senate and House federal elections of 2024. And what I want to do today is I've already had a quick look at the presidential race that was, of course, called on election night, which was a massive shock for many people. But the House race has still not been called, but I'm pretty sure that it's going to be called for the Republicans either way. And I also want to go into the Senate, and I want to have a quick look at what we can expect in the next 2 years in Congress, and also the map for 2026, the midterms in 2026, and what the prospects look like for the Democrats to try and regain both the House and a much harder task, the Senate. But I'll get into that near the end of the video. But I just want to have a quick look at the current results. Now, DDHQ, the most up-to-date and I'd say the most reliable for calling election races in America, currently has the Republicans at 216 seats in the House. They need two more for that majority, 218, the special number, and Democrats need 9 more. Now, they're going to win more seats than the Republicans are going to at this point, but I do think it is an essentially impossible battle for the Democrats to try and win the House. However, the margin is going to be so small that it's going to be really important, and I'm going to come into this in a bit later on. But I just want to quickly go over the seats that are currently uncalled. So Alaska's at-large district, of course, Mary Peltola was up against Sarah Palin in 2022, managing to beat her in the special election, and then at the general election in 2022 both times, mainly down to the ranked choice voting that Alaskans approved in 2020. Now, in the other hand, this is actually going to go against Mary Peltola. However, what is going to happen is the only 74% of the vote is currently in, and much of that is in the rural areas of Alaska, very native population, and voted heavily for Mary Peltola in 2022. So I'm going to say that this race is going to get a bit tighter, but simply John Howe, and pretty much Nick Bajes is not going to get 50% in the first round of voting. But John Howe, the Alaska Independence Party candidate, I'd be very surprised if Mary Peltola wins anywhere near a majority of his votes. And I just think that when you do the final ballots that are going to come in, Nick Bajes is probably going to win, though I wouldn't really be looking at that as a big shock to happen. Also, Colorado's 8th, the incumbent Democrat, let me go back on it, Yadira Caravea, she is probably going to lose this now. We are at the point of 95% votes in, and the returns that are coming out now are looking slightly favourable for Gabe Evans, the Republican challenger, and pretty much now that he is in the lead, albeit by about 2,500 votes, it looks like he's going to keep that lead. So I'd say Colorado 8th is a flip, one that I did not predict. And also Arizona House, the Arizona House 6th seat, Juan Ciscomani is probably going to hold on here again, just because there is 13% of the vote in, so it is way too early to call this just because of how close it is. Again, just about 2,500 votes in it, like Colorado's 8th. But simply, he's taken the lead now, and the outstanding voter in counties that are typically very positive and very Republican-heavy counties. So I'd be very surprised if he relinquishes this lead. And that pretty much puts it all the way down onto the seats in California. Now, California is, of course, notoriously known for taking ages to count their votes. Being in the West, they already had they already don't have that head start that states in the East do, but they simply just have so many ballots across the whole state. I do think we're about 3 or 4 million ballots left to actually be put into the final vote tally in California, which is kind of crazy considering that they've only counted maybe 2/3 of the ballots so far. But I'm just going to quickly go over them because Democrats are going to improve here from their performance back in 2022, but simply not enough unless something unprecedented comes out in the late ballots to be counted. But Josh Harder is probably going to hold on to his lead in the 9th district. The 13th district, Adam Gray this is pretty much a toss-up, but I'd say Adam Gray has the advantage considering the ballots that are coming in now are slightly favouring the Democrats, and only 62% has actually been counted in this district. Fresno, this was actually the Fresno district. Jim Costa is ahead and probably will just about narrowly win, but this was a shock result that it was this close, pretty much. David Valadao is going to hold on to his 22nd seat. Simply, the margin that Democrats are behind is just too much. and 78% of the vote is in. So David Valadao, DDHQ have called this one. Some other places like the AP have not called this one yet, but David Valadao is going to hold on to his seat. Also, this is a big one for the Democrats. A big target, Mike Garcia, is going to lose his seat in the 27th district. George Whitesides has just taken the lead, and simply the votes are going to come in from now and the final stage of counting are going to lean very, very slightly Democratic, but he has the lead of about 2,000 votes, and simply he's not going to relinquish that lead. Ken Calvert in California's 41st, 80% in, and he holds a 8,000 ballot lead. That's probably going to be enough, though this one is going to be fairly close. It's going to come down to about a percentage point. So keep an eye out on that one. And also, I'm going to see if I can find it because it's quite hard to get to in this map. There we go. California's 45th. This one's pretty much complete toss-up. 7,000 votes, 82% in. However, the projected remaining ballots yet to be counted are projected to be Democratic favouring, but we do not know how Democratic favouring. So pretty much the anticipated result for Republicans is they're going to land just about 220, maybe 221. So this is essentially what we're going to be seeing is a almost mirror image of what happened in 2022. So the House pretty much changed in no way, shape, or form, which is kind of impressive considering the red wave at the presidential level was pretty much 6-point swing in favor of the Republicans, and the Republicans actually did a bit better in the House as a whole, but they did better in places like Nebraska, not Nebraska, North Dakota's at-large district, or Montana's second House district, which were not competitive whatsoever. So it's actually really interesting what happened in the House, and we're going to go into what that means for 2026. But I want to quickly go into the final Senate seat that was called. Gallego defeated Kari Lake in the Arizona Senate race, managing to outrun Donald Trump by about 7 points. I'm going to quickly go into the DDHQ Senate Senate map. Let's load that up quickly. They haven't called Pennsylvania yet, just because people don't know where the outstanding ballots are. But Bob Casey Jr. would need a absolute Hail Mary to somehow salvage this, or even put it within the percentage needed for a recount. And simply, he's not going to do it. He's not going to do it. I think he should concede because this race is essentially unwinnable now. And there's actually stories that Chuck Schumer is not going to include the effective Senate-elect Dave McCormick in the Senate, the incoming Senate class, their introductory things that they have to do. Essentially, that's going to be a messy thing. But Bob Casey Jr. is not going to be the senator for Pennsylvania when he's not going to be inaugurated in January 2025. It's not going to happen. However, the Democrats, all in spite of losing Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, and Michigan at the presidential level, are all going to hold on to the seats there. Of course, there's the open seat in Michigan and the open seat is in Arizona, and these are going to be very tight races, pretty much all of them within a point. Maybe not Nevada, that might be a bit bigger than a point, but this is essentially what we're seeing now. And the Democrats did avert a complete disaster in the Senate. Of course, they lost their seats in West Virginia. That was expected. Montana and Ohio, that one's probably going to hurt a bit. And, the Pennsylvania one is going to hurt the most because they actually thought they had a really good chance of holding on to this seat. And Ohio was their main flip. Not to mention that Sherrod Brown did massively overperform Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris lost Ohio by 12 points. He only lost Ohio by 4 points. If Biden's margin of victory in Ohio was repeated in 2024, Sherrod Brown most likely would have stayed on by the skin of his teeth, but he would have stayed narrowly, even if that was the case. But of course, didn't help that the top of the ticket absolutely doomed some of the more competitive Senate races that the Democrats were outrunning in. But this moves on to 2026 because the expectation is that it's going to be 53 seats for the Republicans when Pennsylvania is called, and 47 seats for the Democrats. Of course, pretty much that 51 seat majority, you could pretty much see this as a 54 seat Republican majority because the Republicans hold the vice presidency now, and J.D. Vance will be the tie splitter in any case that it comes down to a 50-50 vote on a certain issue. Now, when you move on to 2026 and imagine you are Chuck Schumer, he was going to stay on as the Democratic minority leader, and you look at where we could possibly pick up seats. You look at Maine and North Carolina as the two ones that stand out as the best targets. Of course, they targeted these in 2020. Maine was actually supposed to flip, according to all the polls and all the experts, but of course, Susan Collins performed a pretty much miraculous hold on because it wasn't even close in the end. It was about 7 or 8 points for her. So that's going to be difficult to hold on there. And also, they're going to have to try and hold on to Michigan with Gary Peters and um, John Ossoff in Georgia. So these are two seats they're going to have to hold on to, let alone they're trying to gain North Carolina and Maine. And even if they do say they win both of those, the Republicans still have a 51 seat majority if they manage to hold on to Michigan and Georgia and gain North Carolina and Maine. So then you're like, okay, if you're a Democrat, where could you possibly aim for? The ones that stand out are possibly Ohio. Of course, it's going to be a Senate special election, but the Republicans should be massively favored to win that. Even if they did run Joe Brown, who clearly just showed that he could outrun a Republican ticket by about 7 or 8 points. That's an area that you might look to possibly pick up. Texas, John Cornyn is going to be up for re-election, but he's nowhere near as unpopular as Ted Cruz was. And of course, Ted Cruz even won election this year by about 9 points, nowhere near how close it was in 2018. Then you might look at Iowa, Joni Ernst. Again, it's not really looking very competitive there, considering she won her margins by a huge margin back in 2020. And then you have Alaska with who is it? I just want to make sure. It should be where is it? Dan Sullivan, yes. And it could be Mary Peltola as a potential Democratic candidate because she's most likely going to lose her House seat. And she could run in 2026. But, these are pretty much the only places in the entire Senate map of 2026 where the Democrats could pick up. So essentially, they're going to have to look to 2028, even if they have a great year. And that means holding Michigan, holding Georgia, and picking up North Carolina and Maine. They're still going to be 49 seats with their two independents that caucus with them. And essentially, that's not looking too good. However, if you're a Republican and you look at the margin that they've won, not only the House, because we are saying that's going to be best case scenario, 221 Republican seats pretty much. And in the Senate, they have a margin of 53. In the Senate, two of the new incoming senators, John Curtis, who replaced the retiring Mitt Romney in Nevada, he is a moderate Republican, has been a moderate Republican for a while. He actually is the founder of the Conservative Climate Caucus. Not the most common thing you're going to find in GOP circles, but he is a centrist Republican and part of the Republican governance group, which I want to quickly go into. They're also known as the Main Street Republicans. And, if you may have heard of some of these people, they are typically, because there are some Trump supporters in this caucus group, but typically these are the rhinos, aka Republican in name only, politicians that people on the right wing of the Republican Party tend to attack as, getting in the way of their votes. And when this actually came to a head in 2017, especially when it came to the repeal of the ACA, also known as Obamacare, of course, the famous moment was Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, two Republican senators who are going to make up that 53 seat majority. However, having 53 seats now instead of 52 or 51 is a big thing for the Republicans because they can pretty much bypass these two senators now. However, John McCain was the addition to infamously stop the skinny repeal of the ACA. In the Senate that day. So that was quite an important moment, but it kind of just shows that if John Curtis, who is a fairly moderate Republican, new incomer, and also Jim Justice, though is really a interesting one to look here because he ran as a Democrat, but he'd always technically been a Republican. He described himself as a moderate Democrat or a moderate Republican and a conservative Democrat. He's replacing Joe Manchin, of course, who was, a pain in the backside of many of the Democratic leaders in the Senate for, years at this point. Of course, he ended up being an independent, but it's important to note that, this Republican majority is actually, all four of these people, as well as some other people, such as Bill Cassidy, and there's also one of the Republican senators from Indiana, have not had the best relationship with Trump. I think it's going to be a better idea to see how the secret ballot of the next Senate Republican leader, of course, Mitch McConnell is retiring from that position, and position he has held for about 15 or so years now, an incredibly long time. Of course, the people running are John Thune, not too friendly with Donald Trump, John Cornyn, not too friendly with Donald Trump, and Rick Scott, who is pretty much seen as the MAGA or Donald Trump aligned candidate. We're going to see that vote's going to take place in about 2 or 3 days now. And it's going to be really interesting to see if Republicans are going to fall in line with Donald Trump, or Senate Republicans, should I say, are going to fall in line with Donald Trump and pretty much vote for Rick Scott, or whether John Cornyn or John Thune, one of the two Johns, are going to be the next Senate leader. And that's going to give a good sign of how strongly the Senate Republican membership is in favor of supporting Donald Trump with pretty much no guardrails. So I think that gives a good idea of how we are looking. Of course, Republicans have a trifecta. Let's just get that clear. They have a trifecta in the Senate, in the House, and of course the presidency being the biggest one with the biggest mandate, because the Senate lead is about 53, is going to be 53 Republican seats. The House is going to be on a knife's edge, and if Democrats do well in these final districts, specifically in California, then it could be a really important majority that they have, and could actually pretty much block a lot of the more contentious stuff. Because back to the ACA, Republicans had a majority of about 30 seats. They had about 240 seats back in this 115 Congress from 2017 through to 2019, and they only managed to pass the repeal of Donald Trump's American Health Care Act by 217 to 213. Their margin in the House is going to be about 3, possibly 5 seats in a best case scenario. So this is not the big margin that they had in Donald Trump's first term, and it's going to be a lot harder to pass stuff. And I've also highlighted some of the moderate Senate Republicans. I think give it 2 days, see how the internal, behind closed doors Senate leadership ballot happens, and if it's one of the two Johns, John Cornyn or John Thune, it's going to be really interesting to see that this is not a Republican Senate membership that is fully supportive of Donald Trump. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I'm going to keep you updated on some of the analysis to come out of the presidential election. I'm going to be doing that when we have some more final results and have a better idea of what the actual popular vote was, but that's going to be coming soon. So stay tuned for that, and I hope to see you all again very soon.